Hello, hello, welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and on Sundays I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. This week's we're looking at a classic of political theory, The Law by Frederic Bastiat. The accompanying cocktail comes from this book, Tarot and Tequila, and Other Spirits by David A. Ross. The cocktail is Justice card. It is 1 ounce of pineapple infused tequila, 1 ounce of Aperol, 1 ounce of Yellow Chartreuse, a dash of orange bitters, a dash of grapefruit bitters, and a dash of Scrappy's Firewater Habanero Tincture bitters, or in my case, smoked chili bitters, because it was going to take too long to get the Scrappies here, so I'm going with the substitute that I had on hand. Let's do this. I also had to infuse my own tequila with pineapple because I didn't know where to buy pineapple infused tequila. I think they may have had something similar at the store, but I went with this. This is going to take me a minute to pour and not... Oh my god. Stop wasting it. But I got my ounce. That's all I need. Alright, so... kind of like last week, I am going to start with a quick bio on Bastiat. Frederic Bastiat was born in 1801 in France. He was orphaned by the age of 9, and from there he was raised by his uncle in the family export business, which means he got kind of a bird's eye view of how government regulations affect markets. Now, usually not in a good way, and yes, that means tariffs. It's going to be a hot button issue this next 4 years, since that's what the president ran on, was getting rid of taxes, raising tariffs. Necessarily a good thing. Anyways, he read through and self-taught economic and political theory by reading Adam Smith, Jean-Baptiste Say, Richard Cobden, and judging by the quotes he included in The Law, Robespierre, Rousseau, and basically just a lot of political theoreticians. And he had some very strong opinions on Fidelité, Liberté, Fraternité. Hang on. Oh, chartreuse is nice. I've never had just straight chartreuse, but that was quite lovely, actually. So, in this book, he comes hard after socialism and its eventual endgame, communism. And yes, he calls both of them out by name. So these two political theories are... a little bit older than Marx. When did Marx write Communist Manifesto? You know what? That's a good question. They might not be older than Marx. Well, socialism is. Socialism certainly predates Marx, because that was kind of what was taking over in France when the French Revolution happened, and that's the turmoil into which Frederic Bastiat was born. Yeah, 1847. Okay. So it was probably around before then, well before then. They just kind of came up with their own spin on it, if you will. Did I say 1 dash of each? I sure did. Not a very long review, and we may or may not be having a neighbor stop by, so I'm trying to get through this before the neighbor stops by. Probably a little more than a dash of orange. So yeah, he comes hard after socialists and communists, and he names them both, and he hates them. And I already love this man. I mean, it's too bad he's dead, right? I, again, probably did too many dashes of the bitters there. He calls out public education, the danger of political empires, lobbying and lobbyists, and those who would seek to push tariffs to benefit themselves, or even those who lobby against tariffs just to better their own industry. Let me stir this up. The nice thing about the pineapple infused tequila is I'm now going to have some very boozy pineapple slices to go with breakfast tomorrow, or next week, I guess. Wow, it's another orange cocktail. I'm not sure what I make of this, but that is an orange cocktail. Blah, blah, blah. Orange. Kind of matches my eyeshadow. Okay, and to that end, he comes out swinging. He states emphatically from the absolute get-go that the law has been perverted to serve the needs of the elected few. And he saw this and commented on this as far back as 1850 when he first published The Law, and pointed out that the countries that lead the way in happiness, productivity, and advancements are those that govern least. Kind of a riff on Thomas Jefferson, those who govern best govern least, right? In 1850, he saw the United States as an ideal nation with 2 exceptions. Slavery, absolutely horrified by slavery, and protectionist tariffs. There's that tariff again. He's not wrong. Wow, my ice cube split in two. That is a very mild cocktail. Well, that's a well-named cocktail. It's very balanced. It's very balanced, as one would hope in the scales of justice. Very balanced. There's no one overwhelming flavor profile. That's quite delightful. I enjoy this. And as I was reading through this book, it became eerily prescient. And it was like foreshadowing for the next 150 years. I mean, all the way up through the early 21st century. And Bastiat said, quote, "It is in the nature of men to rise against the injustices of which they are victims. When, therefore, plunder is organized by law for the profit of those who perpetrate it, all the plundered classes tend either by peaceful or revolutionary means to enter in some way into manufacturing of laws." Basically, when people have been victimized, they join the political class and become the victimizers. It's a cycle which repeats itself just kind of ad nauseum until we find ourselves in the current political predicament where everything is tit for tat, and oh my god, the other guy is the worst guy ever. And how could the other people vote for him? They must all be racist bastards. Ad nauseum. Lather, rinse, repeat. Again and again until we all die or engage in another civil war, which I don't recommend. And he points out that people tend to see the law as justice. Ideally, yes, law is justice. Bastiat says that repeatedly. Law is justice, unless it's been perverted for the uses of those of the political class, which we have most very clearly seen. Let's unpack that a little further. Spite has driven many to join the political class, where they then use their political cudgel to bludgeon those who disagree with them into silence. We just literally had 4 years of that, right? I mean, so much so. Think of what's happening to J.K. Rowling. Being Libertarian just tweeted this out last week. Quote, "It's safe to say the lawfare bullshit really pissed off Trump with his selection of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General." Lawfare is the strategic use of legal proceedings to intimidate or hinder an opponent. Largely, that's how Trump ended up with his second term. The American people saw the Democrats, well, trumping up charges, if you will, to prosecute him. And a lot of Americans saw this as a deliberate attempt to keep Trump from running again. Which also just goes to show how much sitting Congress critters have not actually read the Constitution, which they swear an oath to uphold, right? Because the Constitution does not actually preclude anyone with a criminal record from being a sitting president. Now, the Constitution allows for the removal of a president in the case of high crimes and misdemeanors, but even a felony conviction is not enough to keep a felon from being sworn in. So you guys massively overplayed your hand. You used lawfare, and the American people said, "What are you going to do? Don't be scumbags next time." Better yet, read the Constitution a little better. Practice that reading comprehension before engaging in lawfare. America spoke loud and clear on this one. And reading through Bastiat, you see how he influenced those who came after, especially Dr. Ron Paul. I mean, Ron Paul is like his direct descendant on this political thought, if you will. Bastiat says, quote, "In fact, if law were confined to causing all persons, all liberties, and all properties to be respected, if it were the obstacle, the check, the chastisement opposed to all oppression, to all plunder, is it likely that we should dispute much as citizens on the subject of the greater or lesser universality of suffrage?" And really, that's it. The law should only exist to protect property rights. But this does not include the right to own slavery. Like I said, he was very, very anti-slavery. Slavery should always have been illegal, which Bastiat acknowledges. All right. Anything else leads to corruption and abuse of power. Bastiat recounts a letter exchange he had with Monsieur de Lamartine, who wrote to Bastiat, quote, "Your doctrine is only the half of my program. You have stopped at liberty. I go on to fraternity," end quote. Yeah, fraternity, socialism. Bastiat responds, quote, "The second part of your program will destroy the first. Fraternity will destroy liberty." And in fact, it is impossible for me to separate the word fraternity from the word voluntary. I cannot possibly conceive fraternity illegally enforced without liberty being legally destroyed and justice legally trampled underfoot. End quote. Mic drop. He's so true. Because those who push for equity and equality get neither. And we end up in this downward spiral of clusterfuckedness that where we're at now, right? You can't force associations, and doing so has led to the voluntary resegregation of college campuses. Voluntary. And they're taught that this is politically just and they should be self-segregating rather than forcing to learn to get along with people by stint of the fact that we all live on the same fucking planet and nobody gets out alive. It's awfully hard to argue with. I mean, government forcing association has not ended well for anyone. I mean, hell, the first lawsuits against affirmative action were filed during Carter's administration. Free markets have shown that if you let people associate by choice rather than force, most of them are going to choose what will bring them profit. Most of them. Because doing otherwise results in loss of income through loss of business as news of their policies spread. I'm reading the book on Reagan now for next week's review, and he even said point blank, I won't patronize a business that has segregation. I won't do it. I'm not going to do that. I don't agree with segregation. I think that it is vile and evil, but I also don't think that the government should be regulating who we can associate with. But if I find out a business is engaged in segregation or won't serve a certain class, then I myself will not patronize that business. That's how you do away with segregation in businesses. That's how you close it down, is you just let people decide for themselves. What about public education? What about public education? This is highly topical as President-elect Trump promises to dismantle the Department of Education, which was created under Carter and has literally accomplished nothing good, other than the spread of homeschooling in defense against public indoctrination. I think one of my favorite freakout tweets this week was, this one here, which I especially love, that apparently the author deleted the tweet when people pointed out that it's not the win she thought it was, because this failure happened under the Department of Education. The failure was there before the Department of Education. Again, reading the Reagan book, and at one point he had, I don't want to cross my books too much, but again, it's topical, so it's relevant, so I'm bringing it in now. He used to do like 5-minute radio announcements morning and night, and one of the ones he was talking about was a failure of educational system. This was before the Department of Education, but it was more of a dig at the unions, teachers' unions, and how the teachers' unions protect the teachers, not the students. Remains true. Still a valid point, Mr. Reagan. President Reagan. As Bastiat points out, socialism, like the old policy from which, this is another quote. As Bastiat points out, quote, socialism, like the old policy from which it emanates, confounds government and society. And so, every time we object to a thing being done by government, it concludes that we object to its being done at all. We disapprove of education by the state, then we are against education altogether. We object to a state religion, then we would have no religion at all. We object to an equality which is brought about by the state, then we are against equality, etc., etc., end quote. Now, to anyone who actually talks to their neighbors, family, and friends, who maybe don't see eye to eye with them politically, it's obvious the above statement is profoundly hyperbolic and very accurate. And this is what is being pushed right now across the Twitter sphere and across newscasts nationwide. If they're against us, if they're not with us, they're against us, right? And if people want to dismantle the Department of Education, they must want an uneducated populace. And that's very, very patently not true. All right, most people don't object to their kids being educated, they object to their kids being indoctrinated. That's the problem people have with public schools these days. People don't object to the concept of religion. We very much would object if the state came in and started saying everybody must attend, say, a Catholic church. How would you feel if you were forced to go to a Catholic church every Sunday? A lot of people would be really pissed off about that. How would you feel if the state came in and said you must attend a mosque every Sunday? A lot of people are going to be pissed off by that thought. We don't object to religion, we object to the state enforcing it on us. All right? We don't object to equality, we object to the state forcing it on us, because the only thing that happens is that we all end up being equally poor. nobody can get ahead when we're all equally poverty-stricken, which is what the government has been doing. That's what inflation does. It makes us all equally poverty-stricken. We're against those things being provided by, or more accurately forced on us by, the state. Because when the state supplies the education, it's education that only benefits the state. In last week's review, I pointed out that students these days are not taught the Constitution. I talked with a friend of mine who had to explain to her checkout clerk at the store that if you don't like the options, you could actually select none of the above or even skip an option altogether. Because those things are not taught in schools. Because why would the state ever teach us what we needed to know to legally overthrow them? Religion is probably a shared thing with the socialists. I mean, no one ever wants the state taking over religion. But certain sects of society have deemed certain religions untouchable. As in, don't you dare ever criticize this religion. Pretty sure y'all know what religion I'm referencing. Has led to an interesting political twist in Palestine being avidly defended on campuses nationwide. There's that dig against public education again. Even though Palestine, or more specifically Islam, is avidly anti-woman, anti-gay, anti-Jewish, core Western values of freedom. Bastiat spends quite a few pages cherry-picking political theory he disagrees with, from Robespierre and Rousseau and others, explaining why they are wrong, and rounds out the essay with his central premise. Law is justice. If it is an unjust law, then it is abhorrent, and it is not the law. It can't be because it is unjust. Like the laws that allowed slavery to flourish. All right, that's an unjust law, so it cannot be the law. It should never have been the law. If a law steals from one to give to another, then it should be ignored, according to Bastiat. I'm not recommending we all stop paying our taxes because the government will roll in, confiscate your property, and throw your ass in jail. We're not rich enough to not have that happen to us. I may be fully in sympathy with what he says, but I'm not looking to get myself arrested for directing other people to, not pay their taxes, for example. This one gave me plenty of food for thought. And there's a lot to unpack. It's a very short book. It's 64 pages, and look how much tabs I have in there just with those 64 pages. There's a lot of food for thought in here. There's a lot to unpack. It probably needs more than one read to really unpack it. But I enjoy anything that makes me think. And there's so very little out there that makes you think these days, especially if you were raised on the internet. So if you want to delve into a thought process that has influenced political theorists for the last 174 years, then I highly recommend The Law by Frederic Bastiat. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye.